This video is long overdue, but it's in response to Rational Roundtable's response to my video on my doubts about the faith. I've decided to do the response on my Answers in Nature channel instead of Creative Mind. In regards to Numbers 31, I would agree what Wolf Syndrome commented when he said taking the virgins for yourselves as a clue that it was hormone-driven humans and not a deity that waged war on these people. I had tried to rationalize this, considering it a story of allegory, which would be easier for me to do if it wasn't for the part about taking the virgins. The borrowed mythology I was referring to was actually the creation and flood stories. There is ample evidence that the creation and flood stories were borrowed from Babylonians and Sumerians. I do recognize, however, that there are a lot of problems with the Zeitgeist movie when they say Jesus was borrowed from earlier stories as well. I personally believe Jesus existed, but I'm still uncertain as to whether the details in the Gospel are true. When I said apologetics were a weak support for faith, I meant that while they supported my faith to a certain degree, some of the arguments did not stand out well. So, as an advocate of reason, I did explore a lot of apologetics. After studying apologetics, I was still left with some unanswered questions. Certain events in the Gospels, such as the saints coming out of their graves, for example, have no support in outside sources. I did not mean to say that all fundamentalists reject reason in apologetics, but that since many of them have a very high reliance on faith, it would seem that they wouldn't care to look into apologetics. I may have been exaggerating somewhat when I accused the religious right of calling nature an evil to be destroyed. I was referring to certain fundamentalist politicians, namely Sarah Palin. These politicians take the verse in Genesis about man having dominion over creation way too literally. I am very glad that you love nature, as I do too. The Pacific Northwest is indeed a very pretty area. I've never been there, but only seen pictures, such as that of Mount Shuksan, which I have a poster of just above my computer. I know of some Christian environmentalist groups, which I will link in the box below in case you're interested. I agree that the church has a lot of problems. Sometimes I think the politics of Palin and others are a church in itself. But I do not reject the moral teachings of Christ. I do, however, reject fundamentalism. At this moment in my life, I consider myself on the fence. I go to a fairly moderate church that has a woman pastor. I asked her what her views are on the interpretation of Genesis, but she said she'll have a sermon on that in the fall, which I'm looking forward to. I also am reading about other spiritual paths, such as Taoism and Native American spirituality, in order to keep an open mind. I likely won't be making any religion videos in the near future, but I will continue to pwn creationism.